And good evening, Pittsburgh Steelers fans. Welcome to another episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. I am your host, as always, Tony Defio, and I certainly thank you for joining me on this lovely, fairly lovely Friday evening in Pittsburgh. It's a bit cold, but it's not too bad. And I'm certainly glad that you're with me. And before I continue, as always, I encourage you to please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We bring you live shows each and every day and night, including this show, The Hangover, The Hangover every Monday with Shannon White and Brian Anthony Davis. Of course, the Scobro Show with Dave Schofield and his brother Rich. Know Your Enemy / The Curtain Call with Jeffrey Benedict. And from what I understand, Shannon White's on that show now. So please check that out. The Touchdown Under with Matty Pepperall and Mark Davison. We Run the North. I always forget some shows every week. We Run the North with Kevin Tate. I believe you know him as Tate Boys. That's a great live show. Let's see, Steelers Preview with Jeff Hartman, Dave Schofield, and Brian. Post-game stuff. Am I missing anything? I usually am. But you can check those out every day and night on YouTube. And, of course, you can check those out live on Facebook, too. And if you're watching me on Facebook right now, you know that. Hello. And as I always say, please be gentle. And you can catch all of those live shows after the fact on any audio platform of your choosing. And we also have a audio-only plethora host of shows that you can catch on any audio platform, including From the Cutting Room Floor with Jeffrey Benedict, The Live Mic with Michael Beck, The Stat Geek with Dave Schofield, The War Room with Matty Pepperall. Let's Ride with Jeff Hartman, the Steelers Half Hour with Chris Pugh, What It's Talking About with Kyle Kreis. Let's see. I was looking at some shows earlier, listening to some, actually. I don't have a whole lot of time, so I can't listen to all of them. Bad Language with Brian Anthony Davis. Let's see. Here We Go, Steelers Show with Brian and KT Smith, the great KT Smith. He's a great head coach. He has a great football mind. I think that's all of them, but I'm sure there's more. But you can catch any of those on any audio platform. I love our iHeartRadio, but you can catch them anywhere you can find Steelers podcasts. So please check those out. Our podcast family is growing. Our shows are growing. Our Andrew Wilbar, oh my gosh, Jeremy Betts, they do great work with the Draft Fix, I believe it's called. There's so many shows. I mean, you guys are just doing yourselves a disservice if you don't check those out. And, of course, check out Behind the Steel Curtain, the website. We bring you news, commentary, film breakdown. Anytime there is a breaking story, like a former Steelers draft pick, quarterback signing with a AFC North rival, we're here to bring it to you. So please check us out. It's your one-stop shop for all your Steelers needs. And let's see who we have in the live chat on this lovely Friday night. Jared Double, first one in. Cree X, he says, good evening, Behind the Steel Curtain. George Teston says, there's no need to fear. Underdog is here. I don't know. He's quoting somebody. I don't know who that is. Maybe it's Underdog, the superhero. I don't know. Clarence Washington, Steeler Chick 46, Kathy Forrid. Eric Dove. Just me joining us for the first time in a few weeks. All right. Steelers Pittsburgh, always with us every week. Dill Whittet from YouTube. Reginald Rivers from YouTube. He says, what's up, Steeler Nation from Bartlett, Tennessee. All right. And I think that's everybody. Okay. Let's get into some news. And the latest news for your Pittsburgh Steelers was the announcement, really not that long ago, on Friday evening, that Joshua Dobbs, the 2017 fourth round pick out of, I'm drawing a blank, Tennessee, right? If I'm not correct, you can correct me in the live chat. But Josh Dobbs signed a deal with the Cleveland Browns. And I'm sorry to see him go. I mean, he's come and gone a couple of times over the years. But obviously he was never really seriously in the Steelers' future plans at quarterback. And yeah, he signed with the Browns. I don't really have a problem with that. Why would I? I mean, fans have to realize these jobs are pretty scarce, and what you make even as a backup quarterback or a third string quarterback in the NFL, I mean, it's much more than what most jobs pay. So why is Josh Dobbs hanging around, going from team to team, even a team in the AFC North? Because he's trying to make a great living. And believe it or not, even though we like to make fun of these guys, not Josh Dobbs, but in general, in the grand scheme of things, being a third string quarterback in the NFL is a pretty good living. So if I'm Josh Dobbs, even if I know, and he's a very smart guy, as we all know, he's a rocket scientist. If I know that my chances of having a successful NFL career as a starter are pretty slim, I do know, if I'm a smart guy, which he is, that I can make a pretty good living for several years and maybe set myself up for life, if I stick around long enough. And I'm sure that is factoring the Josh Dobbs decision. Who knows? Maybe he still has a dream of being a starting quarterback in the NFL, or maybe he's interested in coaching someday and he's hopping around from team to team and trying to absorb as much as he can from several different coaches. Who knows? But best of luck to Josh Dobbs. All right, let's talk about some of the topics in the description for tonight's show, starting with obviously the upcoming NFL draft. I wrote about this on Friday. I think it's funny how things have changed over the years in the offseason, thanks to free agency and thanks to social media, and just times are different now than they were even 5-10 years ago. And free agency is looked at as this almost, I'd say in a lot of circles, it's up there with the draft as far as being a building block for NFL teams. Now, is that just a perception or is that the reality? I think it's more perception than reality, but it certainly does influence how teams approach it. And I was reminded recently of a little anecdote involving Troy Polamalu, Bill Cowher, Kevin Colbert in the 2003 Steelers, and involving free agency. And obviously, it didn't involve Polamalu because he was a college draft prospect who certainly was a bona fide first round candidate, but the Steelers were picking 27th, so there was no way they were going to get him out of USC to fill their vacancy at safety, or their desire to upgrade at safety. So they went looking in free agency, and they had a verbal agreement with Dexter Jackson, who was a safety with the Buccaneers. He had just won Super Bowl MVP honors in the Buccaneers win over the Raiders in what Super Bowl was that? That was the following the 2002 season, so that would be Super Bowl 37. So he was just voted Super Bowl MVP, and he had reached a verbal agreement with the Steelers to sign with them. He was heading into his second contract. He was a 1999 fourth round pick. He started 2 straight years at the end of his rookie contract, and it looked like the Steelers had found their man at safety. But then Jackson had a change of heart at the last second, and he decided to sign with the Cardinals, What reason did he have? Probably more money. I mean, that's usually the bottom line for most of these guys, and I don't blame them. It would probably be for me too if I was in their world and grew up in their world. You're trying to maximize your earning power for as long as you can. So he had a change of heart, probably got offered more money from Arizona, signed with them. So the Steelers were left scrambling, and they immediately put their focus on Polamalu. They studied him. They had convinced themselves that he was their man and he could make a difference in their defense, in their secondary. So on draft day in 2003, they traded up with the Chiefs. They went from 27 to 16, drafted Polamalu, and the rest, as they say, is history. Polamalu is one of the greatest strong safeties of all time, former Defensive Player of the Year, 2010, two-time Super Bowl winner. They went to the Super Bowl 3 times. The year that they lost, that was the year he was the Defensive Player of the Year. Obviously, first ballot Hall of Famer. He just went in last year. One of the greatest Steelers of all time. Certainly one of the most popular. There's no doubt about that. But also one of the greatest Steelers who has ever lived. But if Jackson hadn't changed his mind and signed with the Steelers instead of going to Arizona, how different would Steelers history be? And would the Steelers have still been as aggressive in going after Polamalu if they had Jackson, again, who was a young guy, he was 26 at the time, in the fold? And I say they probably wouldn't have, because they probably would have felt like, all right, if you're them, not me, I'm not speaking as a fan, I'm speaking as them. All right, we have this safety now. We can focus on other needs. The Chiefs selected Larry Johnson with that pick. So would they have gone in that direction? They were still trying to find Jerome Bettis' replacement, even though he was still on the roster at that time. They were still trying to replace him. 2003 was the year that he lost his job to Amos Zaraway. When that didn't work out in 2004, they signed Deuce Staley. So would they have gone with Larry Johnson, who was a pretty good running back, certainly not a first ballot Hall of Famer, though, and I doubt he would have been a generational talent with the Steelers. So, or would they have gone in a different direction with a different position? Who knows? We'll never know. All I know is Polamalu came here and was a game changer and every offensive coordinator and quarterback's nightmare. So my point is, just because the Steelers made all these moves in free agency, they brought in Mitch Trubisky at quarterback, James Daniels, who is a fine young guard, I'm not going to lie. And he's probably the one free agent that they signed that maybe it'd be silly to try to find his replacement because, guards, and at least in this year's draft, I don't think there's going to be a guard there for them to select at number 20. But just because but say like this year's like say David DeCastro was in this year's draft, and he slipped to 20, and you say, well, okay, we have Kevin Dotson at one guard, we have James Daniels at the other guard, we signed Mason Cole, we have Kendrick Green. Our interior line, we have a lot of young bodies. We don't need this David DeCastro, do we? Would they have passed him by? And I think, when people read my article on Friday, at least one person said, well, this is just your way of saying, go for the best player available. And that's not really what I was trying to say. I think that's a sort of like a catch-all phrase or a gotcha phrase that people say every year. Pick the best player available no matter what. But that's not what I was trying to say. What I was trying to say is just because you addressed a position in free agency doesn't mean you should stop trying to address it if the right player presents itself in the draft, in that year's draft. Obviously in, say, 2008, it would have been silly for the Steelers to try to draft another strong safety when Troy Polamalu was in the prime of his career, or in 2011 to draft a quarterback in the first round when Big Ben Roethlisberger was still in the prime of his career, or in 2013 to go after another center when you had Marquise Pouncey. And the reason why I say it would have been silly is because if you're the Steelers, you knew what those players brought to the table. They were proven commodities. But when you're talking about free agents that you just brought in, and let's remember, most free agents in the NFL, it's not like baseball or hockey or these other sports. Football has a weird kind of thing, a prohibitive thing, probably unfair to its top stars, but they keep signing new CBAs every few years, where they prevent the top players in the game from really reaching free agency. So you're not dealing with the top tier free agents, or the top tier players, I should say, every year. You're usually dealing with players who weren't deemed good enough to be franchise tagged. So you're not dealing with the best of the best every year. Yeah, you're dealing with some good players. I'm not trying to say that. But just because you have Mitch Trubisky, for example, as your quarterback, and I'm not saying he's a great free agent pickup, but when they brought him in here, it's sort of led many to say, well, now they can focus on other areas in the first round, and they can wait until next year or the year after that to find their quarterback. He's their bridge, so they don't have to worry about quarterback this year. But what if they feel so strongly about a Malik Willis or a Kenny Pickett or a Matt Corral or a Sam Howell or Desmond Ridder, and those guys are there at 20, or one of those guys is there at 20, and you feel like, all right, we feel this guy can really be a great NFL quarterback. Are you going to pick him, or are you going to pass him by because you feel like Mitch Trubisky can give you a couple good years at quarterback? I think you'd be silly to not draft that guy. Or what if it's Tyler Linderbaum, the center from Iowa? You brought in Kendrick Green. You drafted Kendrick Green last year. Obviously, he struggled, but you went and you signed Mason Cole this year, who has 39 career starts at both guard and center. And it's believed at this moment that he's going to step in and be the starting center in 2022. Now, Tyler Linderbaum, if you follow the draft, and everybody probably in the live chat and who's listening to this podcast follows the draft, that Linderbaum is really highly thought of, and he's one of the highest graded centers in a while. And he's certainly head and shoulders above any other center in this class, as I mentioned on last week's show. He's ranked 20th on Draft Tech's big board, and the second one, Alec Lindstrom, is ranked 103rd. So there's a big disparity between him and pretty much any other center who's ranked behind him on any big board that you find. So what if he falls to them at 20? Do you pass a Linderbaum up? Because maybe you're going to be okay with Mason Cole. Maybe Kendrick Green will be a really good center for you. Maybe J.C. Hassenauer can be a really good center for you. But what if Linderbaum becomes a Hall of Fame center? There's a difference between pretty good and great. And just by his pedigree alone, Linderbaum has a chance to be really great. Doesn't mean he will. He could be a bust. Any draft pick is capable of being a bust, regardless of how well they're thought of or how high they're graded before the draft. So I guess that's the point I was trying to make is, just because you address the need in the draft doesn't mean you stop trying to address a need. In free agency, doesn't mean you stop trying to address that need in the draft. If a player is there that you feel could be even an upgrade over the guy that you just signed in free agency, you have to you owe it to yourself to seriously consider drafting him. So that's the point I was trying to make in that article, and I just wanted to clarify because I think it's pretty fascinating because it's such a different time now, and I think unlike any other sport, the draft is still the best way for NFL teams to build their franchise, to build up their roster, to improve and address areas of need. And I think it's been proven that NFL player, college prospects, NFL draft picks, I should say, they usually have the highest impact immediately on their team. Out of all the sports, the NFL draft picks can come in and make an immediate impact right away and be impact players in their rookie years and be difference makers in their rookie years. And, they're usually the most professional ready. Obviously, baseball players, it takes years normally for them to be ready to take it to the highest level. Same with hockey, NBA. It all depends on what team they get drafted to. But if there's 2 or 3 really good players on an NBA team, the chances of a first round rookie having a major impact right away are pretty slim. So I think NFL players, have usually make the highest impact right away. So it just fascinates me that so many teams and fans and the media, they talk in absolutes when a team goes out and signs a guy in free agency. So that's all I had to say about that. And let's move on to other things. And that's the Steelers and whether or not they should sign Diontae Johnson to a fairly lucrative contract extension as he prepares to play in his 4th season. He's heading into the final year of his rookie deal. And, Michael Beck wrote something about this the other day, and Dave Schofield, and I'm not talking about this because of them. I've been wanting to talk about this for a while. I've been wanting to write about this, but I saw they wrote about it. I said, I can't write another article about the Steelers and whether or not they should pay receivers. So I figured I'd talk about it on this show. And I think it's a bit of an overstatement to say that they're great at drafting receivers and developing them. They're pretty good at it, but they're far from perfect. And I think their reputation has been skewed a bit because of Antonio Brown and the fact that he is arguably the greatest receiver in team history, and they found him in the 6th round. And he certainly had the greatest run in NFL history over between 2013 and 2018. Him, and then you factor in the rest of Young Money. Mike Wallace had a fairly good career. Is he still playing? I don't know, but he certainly had a great career, or a good career. She's not a great career, but a good career. Certainly, he outperformed being a 3rd round pick in 2009. Same with Emmanuel Sanders, who was a 3rd round pick in 2010, the same draft as Brown. He's had a pretty decent career. And then, of course, Juju Smith-Schuster has been, he's kind of a polarizing figure in some circles, but, he got off to a great start and he's kind of struggled a bit over the last few years, but you could pretty much label him as a success. Martavis Bryant, phenomenal talent. They drafted him in the 4th round in 2014. He had a great start to his career, but the off the field stuff affected that, and he never quite got over that. And by 2017, it was pretty much done as a potent force in the NFL. Obviously, Diontae Johnson, he could be close to becoming a top tier receiver in the NFL, and Chase Claypool, the jury's still out on him, although the talent is evident and the potential is certainly there. So those guys are, I'd say, Diontae Johnson. In my opinion, I think he is an example of their ability to draft receivers and develop them. Chase Claypool is still, the jury's out. But others, I mean, I wrote all these down. 2012, they drafted Tony Clemens out of Colorado in round 7. He had a nothing career. 2013, they drafted Marcus Wheaton in the 3rd round out of Oregon State. Everybody was excited about him. I know I was. I thought he would be a great pro, and he was okay when he was here. He had 107 receptions for 1,500 yards over a few seasons, but he never really. His career kind of flamed out after that. Justin Brown out of Oklahoma, he was picked in the 6th round that same year. He really did nothing as an NFL receiver. Sammy Coates showed promise, 3rd round pick in 2015 out of Auburn. He had some injury problems in the 2nd year, and he was never the same after that. DeMarcus Ayers was a 7th round pick out of Houston in 2016. He showed some promise his rookie year, but did nothing after that. James Washington, 2nd round pick in 2018 out of Oklahoma State. He showed flashes when he was here, especially in 2019. Ironically enough, playing with Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges as his quarterbacks, he led the team receiving yards, but he really didn't build on that. And now he's a Dallas Cowboy, and the jury's still out on him too. So, to say that the Steelers are infallible or have this great, just almost perfect record with developing receivers, that they draft, I think that's a bit of a mistake. And my point is, as you know, they've only given second contracts to 2 receivers in the free agency era: Hines Ward, Antonio Brown. Obviously, they might be the 2 greatest receivers in franchise history. So it's no shocker that they kept them around after their rookie deals. But I don't think you can say, well, that policy, I don't think should necessarily continue moving forward, because there isn't great evidence that they can just go out there and draft receivers and bring them in here and throw them in the system and have them be Pro Bowlers, like they do with outside linebackers over the years. I mean, that's a position you might say, okay, we're gonna just bring in draft picks and have them be productive pros, which they had a great run of that for the longest time until they drafted Jarvis Jones. But overall, I would say, their record with outside linebackers is far better than it is with receivers. So, and they've paid their outside linebackers over the years. So it might behoove them to pay some, if they find a truly great receiver, or at least even a really good one like Diontae Johnson, to let that guy walk might be a mistake. And I realized, he might want, there's speculation that he wants $90 million over 5 years. I think I saw a projection that he's going to get a contract for about $88 million over 5 years. That's actually pretty reasonable for even a number 2 receiver, or a second tier number 1 receiver in the NFL. Somebody who's maybe not an elite number 1, but somebody who's a number 1 for a team like the Steelers right now that's maybe transitioning a quarterback. That's not a bad. You figure when Antonio Brown got his last contract here, it was about $17 million a year, I think. So for people to think that that's out of line, I think that's a mistake. So I don't know. I don't necessarily think it's just as easy as going out and drafting receivers and developing them just because they're the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think, again, it was that reputation was skewed a bit by young money, namely Antonio Brown. So that's all I had to say about that. And I just have one more topic to cover, and that's just really a celebration of the 1987 NFL draft, the Steelers draft class, because I don't think it gets nearly enough credit as being historically good for them. When people talk about the all-time best Steelers drafts, they obviously talk about 74, 71's up there, and rightfully so. I mean, they produced so many Hall of Famers from those two drafts alone, and it led to 4 Super Bowls in 6 years. But if you look at the 87 draft, and I was going over this the other day, it's my favorite draft of all time. It's my favorite Steelers draft. It was the last time I got to stay home from school. It was the last time it was held on a weekday morning. It was a Tuesday morning in back then. I think it started at 7 or 7:30. And that was the year that Rod Woodson, the great cornerback from Purdue, somehow slipped all the way to number 10. And of course, they nabbed him pretty quickly. And he's arguably the greatest cornerback of all time. Certainly one of the greatest Steelers cornerbacks of all time. But in addition to Woodson, that draft included Delton Hall in the second round, who was a starter for a few years. He didn't really have his career didn't have staying power, but he was a decent pro for a while there. Thomas Everett, safety in the 4th round. Hardy Nickerson, linebacker in the 5th round. Greg Lloyd, linebacker, 6th round, and Merrill Hodge in the 10th round, running back. That's a pretty good draft. And 3 of those players, especially Woodson and Lloyd, went on to form the core of Bill Cowher's playoff teams in the 90s. Hodge was around for a couple of years, and and he certainly was a hero of that 89 playoff team. But he was also on Cowher's first 2 playoff teams in the early 90s. But specifically, Woodson and Lloyd were building blocks and core members and vital members of Cowher's playoff teams of the 90s. So, I think that draft gets overlooked a lot, but it was a pretty fruitful one when you go back and examine it. Everett, he was on the Cowboys first, or not the first, but the first Super Bowl under Jimmy Johnson in '92. Nickerson went on to have a decent career after he left here. He was pretty good here. Then he went and signed with the Buccaneers and had a fairly decent career with them. So that was a pretty good draft. And I just wanted to give it a shout out because it didn't produce any Super Bowls for Pittsburgh, but it helped make Pittsburgh a serious contender again in the 90s after Chuck Noll departed. But he left them with some pretty decent building blocks, and I think he should get more credit for that draft. So those are all the topics I have to cover tonight, and I think I will take some comments and questions before I call it a night. Let's see what we have here from the peeps. I'm scrolling down the live chat and see what these fine folks have to say. And so far, not a whole lot. Terry, my man Terry's in. Sixburg 6 is here. Claude Bishop. Bo McClunnis. Creix. All right. Here's one from Steeler Chick 46, and she says, would love for the Steelers draft Trevor Penning, but he will likely be gone by pick number 20. He's the tackle from Northern Iowa, I believe. Yeah, he's a good prospect, but he's certainly a realistic option for them. Somebody joked the other day that, according to the fans and the media, there are like 40 players that will not be there when the Steelers draft at 20. Somebody's going to fall, and maybe it'll be Trevor Penning. When you factor in the quarterback needs of a lot of teams, and there's a lot of good receivers in this draft, somebody's probably going to fall to them that you didn't expect to be there. So maybe it'll be Trevor Penning. George Teston says that he would like Jordan Davis, the defensive tackle out of Georgia, but he will likely be gone. And that's probably more of there's probably a lesser chance that Davis will be there at 20 than Penning. But there's Diontae Wyatt, and if you followed the site this week, I think it was Jeffrey Benedict, although it was KT Smith, I believe. Yeah, KT Smith, Kevin Smith. He did a great breakdown of Wyatt and his versatility and how he thinks he might be a better 3-down lineman and a better fit for the Steelers scheme than Davis. So check that out. So there you go. Diontae Wyatt's another one who could be a possibility. He's certainly going to be a first-round pick. The question is, will he be there when Pittsburgh selects, and will they consider him strongly? Creek says of all-time Steeler greats, or at least his favorites, Jerome Bettis, of course, Ben Roethlisberger, Hines Ward, Troy Polamalu, Rod Woodson. Yeah, I mean, they're all right up there with me too. I mean, my gosh, the only Steeler jersey I own is Hines Ward, number 86. And of course, I am always going to be grateful of Ben Roethlisberger and what he meant to the organization. Same with Troy Polamalu, Rod Woodson. I mean, he was named to the 75th anniversary team, the NFL 75-year anniversary team. In his 8th year in the league? So I mean, that's to me, that was a testament to what the league already thought of him when he was still in his prime. And of course, Jerome Bettis. I mean, gosh, I've said this in the past. There was just something about Jerome Bettis when he scored a touchdown, or when he had a long run or a tough run, which he often did. There was just something about that just brought it out of me. I just loved it. So yeah, those players are all very near or all dear, not near to me, but dear to me. Steeler Chick 46 says, unpopular opinion, don't draft a quarterback this year. You know what, Steeler Chick? I don't know if that's unpopular. It seems to be a 50-50 split there, but I, as I say every week, you just don't know. And if you're them and one of these guys is there, and chances are somebody from this class, one of the first round candidates is going to be there. If the player there matches, if he winds up being somebody that they feel strongly about, well, then they have to take him. You owe it to yourself. If you're the Steelers and you feel like whatever quarterback happens to be there, if that's somebody that you like, that you feel you can develop into a top tier quarterback, then you have to take him, because the point is to find that guy as quickly as possible. And it's not about trying to wait until next year, or the year after that, or the year after that, some mythical future draft class. As I said on last week's show, Sam Howell, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, Sam Howell is a great example of how perceptions can change in 1 year. Sam Howell was he was once considered a top 5 prospect, and now he might not even get drafted in the first round. So, you can't necessarily go by what people think of the class overall. You have to go by what you think of the individual player. So I'm not saying that they draft a quarterback just to do it, but draft a quarterback if they feel strongly about an individual player. Claude Bishop says of Hines Ward, Number 86 should be in the Hall of Fame because he has better numbers than half the receivers who are in. Well, that's a bit. I mean, I get your point, Claude, but that's a bit misleading. I mean, the game changed so much. By the time Hines Ward entered the NFL, and certainly has changed a lot since then. But guys like Lynn Swann and John Stallworth, they played in a different era. Charlie Joyner, when he broke the all-time receptions record in 1984 against the Steelers at Three River Stadium. I remember it like it was yesterday. Like that, he had 500 or 600 catches, whatever that was. It was 500 and some or 600 and some catches at that point. I mean, that was considered, incredible back then. But it's a different game now. So yeah, Hines Ward does have way more receptions than a lot of the all-time greats. But compared to his peers, he doesn't have as many. But I think he's a Hall of Famer. I think he passes the eye test, and I think he's going to get in someday. He might just have to wait a little while, but yeah, it's a different era now than it was way back in the days of Steve Largent and again Charlie Joyner and those kind of players, those kind of receivers, the all-time greats. Let's see. This is from George Teston. There's no guarantee that Matt Canada is going to work out either. So I don't think they should take a quarterback to fit his system. Well, no. I mean, you take the best quarterback available that you think is available. Obviously, you want somebody to fit Canada's system. But I think that the number one thing that they're looking for in his system is a mobile quarterback. And I think all of these quarterbacks, or at least most of them, obviously Willis and Pickett, Howe, Corral, Ritter, they're all mobile enough. So I think they're all going to fit his system in that way. So I think from that standpoint, that box is checked. Claude Bishop says, of the line, you can't rely on Tuitt, not yet anyway, and everyone else is getting older. That's true. That the defensive line is certainly in play as far as the first or second round pick. Kriek says, I can assume of Diontae Johnson. No, we should not extend his contract. Yes, but lucrative. No, he has not been consistent enough. Well, it all depends on what you mean by lucrative. If you mean, should he get $30 million? I wrote down the what the top receivers are making in 2022 per what they're making in base salary or whatever, as far as overall salary in 2022. And you're talking about guys like the here we are. I wrote that down. Excuse me, I'm not prepared. Here we are. Tyreek Hill is going to make $30 million next year. Devontae Adams, $28 million. DeAndre Hopkins, $27 million. Stephon Diggs, $26 million. DJ Moore from the Panthers, $20.6 million. Keenan Allen, $20 million. So if you're a player like Diontae Johnson, you know how these things go. I mean, it's slotted for the most. I mean, not officially, but officially, it's slotted. And again, Diontae Johnson for a maybe a lower tiered number one receiver, which you could reasonably say he is for the Steelers. Him asking for 16, 17 million a year, that's kind of the going rate. So it's not necessarily about Diontae Johnson. It's about how they address the receiver position moving forward. Are they going to keep thinking that, all right, we're just going to throw draft picks at this position and we'll be okay because we're the Steelers and we're good at it. We're great at drafting receivers and developing them. Or are they going to have to say, look, we're not as great as we thought we were at drafting these guys. So maybe we have to extend these players and give them a rate that a contract that they're happy with, instead of constantly letting them walk and bringing in new blood and hoping that they develop. So. That's right. Clarence for Washington brings up Lima Sweden. That was kind of before their reputation, kind of before the team got this reputation of, being like wide receiver U. They drafted Sweden 08, and of course he never panned out. But really, that reputation began to grow in, like, I'd say around 2010, 2011. That's when people started to say, this team's pretty good at drafting receivers. But yeah, Lima Swede was a little bit before that time. And of course, Steelers Pittsburgh brings up a pretty good and pretty obvious point. Having Big Ben throwing the football made some of these receivers better. That's you can say that about just about any all-time great quarterback. Tom Brady certainly has that reputation. Drew Brees, Brett Favre said, I just looked for the guy that was open, who had the same color jersey as me, and threw it to him. So yeah, like, the franchise quarterback obviously makes a big difference, and Big Ben was a instrumental part in making all these guys better receivers. But Antonio Brown, I mean, he probably was going to be an all-time great regardless of who his quarterback was. I mean, within reason, of course. So on that note, I think it's time to call it a night. We're approaching the 9:47 mark. So I want to thank you all again for joining me. It was a fun show. I think I covered a lot of topics tonight, which it's hard to do now, 3 weeks before the draft. So I was glad. Hopefully I brought you a good show, and I hope you have a great weekend. And I'll talk to you on Monday on the Hangover with Brian and Shannon. And in the meantime, go Steelers. Good night, everybody.